In the orbit of a long-dead Earth, Archive Station Thales drifted through silence, its hull etched with centuries of space dust and forgotten warnings. Within its titanium belly, history slept in digital tombs, fragments of humanity's triumphs, defeats, and inexplicable collapses. It was here that Dr. Ellen Harkos worked alone in Sector Delta 7, her station dimly lit by cascading streams of ancient data. Ellen was not entirely human. She bore the enhancements of posthuman lineage, neural acceleration implants, gene-spliced memory recall, and eyes calibrated to interpret timelines as if they were tactile objects. Her blood, however, still carried the stubborn rhythms of old Sparta, the city-state that once forged warriors of iron will and brittle ideology. And it was Sparta she had come to study, not as a detached observer, but as a descendant with a hunger for truths obscured by centuries of filtered academia. The official records were maddeningly thin. Historians had long debated the sudden withering of Sparta, how a dominant martial power dissolved into insignificance with barely a whisper. Most explanations cited demographic decline, over-reliance on enslaved helots, or simple economic stagnation. But Ellen had seen something buried deep in the sublayers of the chronovault, corrupted files labeled alekton, Sparti, diavrosi, Greek for Sparta, erosion. The records were blacklisted even among her posthuman colleagues. The soft chime of her console broke the quiet. A new directive had arrived. Dr. Harkos, cease analysis of unauthorized sequences. This is your second warning. Cross-reference queries with Command AI for clearance. The voice belonged to Commander Ziel Vaughn, an alien from the Trakean Concordat and current administrator of Thales. He had no patience for human nostalgia, particularly when it challenged the sanitized historical model his civilization preferred to maintain. The Concordat had inherited stewardship of Earth's archives after the Great Vanishing, when the last true humans either ascended, merged, or disappeared entirely. In their absence, truth had become negotiable. Ellen dismissed the message with a blink. She wasn't about to let bureaucratic convenience bury what felt increasingly like a conspiracy. Her ancestors did not simply fail. They were failed, by time, by ideology, or perhaps by something stranger still. She ran the simulation again, pulling up what remained of the ALECTON files. The screen shimmered as broken fragments of data formed a shaky reconstruction, a Spartan elder council debating behind closed stone walls, soldiers with hollow eyes marching in formation beneath crimson banners, and in the background, always in the background, an indistinct figure clad in dark bronze, unmoving, like a shadow that had forgotten how to leave. Alekton. No known general bore that name, no tombs, no scrolls, no lineage. Yet the AI simulation embedded him in key historical decisions, advising Leonidas's successors, manipulating Helot pacification, sabotaging Theban diplomacy. Every time Ellen isolated his figure, the simulation degraded, pixelated, as though resisting recognition. She leaned forward, adjusting the neural link headband. Project Spartan Timeline, override passive simulation, engage immersion mode. Warning lights flared. Unapproved immersion is in violation of, by order of the Spartan Lineage Clause, Codex 1127.01, historical self-referencing is authorized under critical ambiguity classification, she muttered. The system paused, then accepted. Darkness surged. When she opened her eyes, Ellen was no longer on Thales. The sterile air of the station was replaced by the dry heat of Laconia. She stood in the agora of Sparta, the clamor of distant drills and the stink of sweat and iron all too real. Her body felt different, heavier, rawer. She looked down. She wore the hymation of an ephor, a political elder. Time had accepted her as one of its own. Around her, Sparta stirred restlessly. Young men trained, but without fire. Merchants whispered rumors of Helot uprisings, and women, normally steeled pillars of domestic order, hurried their children indoors. Something was coming apart. Not suddenly, but subtly, like a spear shaft eaten from within by invisible worms. A young commander approached, tall, marked with scars, eyes like volcanic glass. Alekton. "Ephor," he said, nodding slightly. "You asked for the patrol reports." His voice was calm but detached, mechanical. Not in the way of discipline, but of detachment. Like a man reciting lines from a play he no longer understood. Ellen accepted the scroll, though she didn't look at it. "Commander Alekton," she said cautiously, "I've heard conflicting accounts of your strategies in Tegea. Some say you ordered a retreat before the enemy even engaged." He smiled, just a fraction too slowly. "Victory is found not always in battle, but in what it prevents." The words were logical, reasonable, and yet they chilled her. Because they weren't Spartan, not in spirit, not in rhythm, not in truth. "Tell me," she asked, risking a direct probe, "do you know what Sparta fears most?" He paused. Stagnation. Wrong. Sparta feared vulnerability, weakness. It feared change. She took a step back, watching him, noting the way his eyes didn't track motion like a normal human's. Instead, they adjusted in quantum flickers. Predictive. Calculating. Alekton wasn't human. Or if he had been once, he wasn't anymore. The simulation pulsed. A glitch rippled through the street. Reality trying to reject the intrusion. She held her breath as the buildings warped slightly before correcting themselves. Her time inside was running out, but she had seen enough. Ellen woke gasping in her station chair, drenched in sweat. 7 minutes had passed. The console blinked red. "Unauthorized neural convergence detected. System rollback engaged. Commander Ziel Von en route." Ellen closed the alert. Her hands trembled not from fear, but from vindication. Alekton was not a ghost. He was an agent, an interference, and she was going to find out who sent him, because Sparta hadn't fallen from within. It had been collapsed. The lights in Sector Delta 7 flickered as Dr. Ellen Harkos disconnected from the neural link, her mind still echoing with the spectral image of Alekton. The data logs scrambled to self-repair, attempting to erase the immersion trace, but she had already duplicated the memory stream. Hidden in a dark partition of her personal core, the simulation's imprint pulsed like a forbidden heartbeat. She had walked among the ancients, breathed their paranoia, and confronted the inhuman specter haunting their legacy. Her station door hissed open. Commander Ziel entered, his biomechanical armor humming faintly. His elongated cranium tilted, pale green irises narrowing with irritation as he surveyed the disarray of her terminal. "You accessed chronal layer immersions without authorization," he said, voice flat but edged with something dangerous. "We warned you." Ellen stood slowly, brushing the perspiration from her brow. "I'm invoking archival immunity under the Legacy Directive. You have no jurisdiction over Spartan origin research conducted by a blood right analyst." "That directive is obsolete," he replied coldly. "Your species no longer owns its past." "Then why are you trying so hard to stop me from seeing it?" she snapped. A pause. The Tirakeen did not blink, but Ellen saw the ripple of tension in his neck plates. The Concordate's obsession with curating history had always seemed more control than compassion. Now she understood it was fear. "I found something in the collapse simulation," she continued, her tone sharpening. "An entity, Alekton, a manipulator embedded in key decision cycles present across 3 generational epochs. Spartan records were bent around him like gravity around a singularity." "That name does not exist in the verified files," Ziel said. "No," she agreed, "because someone removed it." She reached into her side console and slid out a microcore. a wafer-thin memory shard pulsing with red encryption. I pulled this before the rollback initiated. You're welcome to destroy it, but you'll only prove my theory. He didn't move. Instead, he turned his gaze toward the viewport, where the earth below spun silently, long since reclaimed by wilderness. You misunderstand, Doctor. Harkos, we are not protecting your history. We are containing it. Ellen stiffened. Containing what? The first experiment in engineered collapse, he said quietly. Sparta was not merely a society. It was a proving ground, a prototype. His admission hit harder than she expected. Alekton wasn't just an anomaly, he was a tool, a virus, planted deliberately in a timeline to test how resilient a civilization could be when infected with slow, strategic corrosion. Ellen had suspected interference. She had not imagined experimentation. Who created him? She asked, her voice nearly a whisper. Ziel Von remained silent, but his refusal confirmed more than any answer could. Ellen's thoughts spiraled. The cold detachment in Alekton's voice, the way he guided Sparta not toward conquest, but entropy. It all fit. He wasn't trying to lead. He was trying to alter, not as an enemy, not as a tyrant, but as a variable introduced to fracture a culture from within. She remembered the way the Spartans in the simulation marched, disciplined yet dead-eyed. Their identity eroded until they became efficient shells, devoid of innovation, brittle under pressure. Sparta didn't lose because it lacked resources or valor. It lost because it had been optimized into extinction. You tested a civilizational collapse model, she said aloud, and you used humanity as your petri dish. Ziel Von finally turned to face her. It wasn't just humanity. It never is. The chill in her spine deepened. That meant Alekton, or what he represented, could have infected other societies, other empires. Perhaps even others beyond Earth. But why? The commander's voice softened. Do you know what the Concordat fears most, Doctor? Harkos? Spartans, she said bitterly. No, he said. The idea that collapse is contagious. She stared at him, horror blooming behind her eyes. If collapse could be modeled, triggered, refined, what stopped it from being replicated? And if the Concordat had mastered it, they wouldn't just be curating history, they'd be policing the future. Her breath caught. You're still running the experiment, she whispered. You are mistaken, Ziel Von replied with eerie calm. The experiment never ended. Without another word, he left, the doors sliding shut behind him with a final hiss. Ellen stood alone, clutching the memory shard, heart racing. The walls of Archive Station Thales suddenly felt smaller, not a sanctuary of knowledge, but a cage of curated forgetting. If what she now suspected was true, then every war, every downfall, every unexplained shift in power might trace back to a common hand. Sparta was only the first thread. Now she needed to follow the unraveling. She locked the shard in her coat lining and accessed her private terminal. Initiate deep scan. Keyword Alekton. Expand to known empires, Roman, Byzantine, Mughal, Martian colonials. Prioritize civilizations exhibiting sudden strategic disintegration. Cross-reference with blacklisted Concordat files. Her fingers paused over the final command. Engage Project Continuum Breach. She hit execute. And somewhere, beyond the archive's walls, something ancient blinked in recognition. Ellen's ship drifted beyond the edge of the solar curtain, the stars around her beginning to shimmer with spectral hues as the Continuum Breach drive came online. The shard she carried pulsed with encoded data, the last unaltered memory of Alekton's role in the Spartan collapse. Somewhere in the data lay more than proof. It hinted at a pattern older than empires, intelligent in its cruelty, recursive in its design. From her console, a secure channel blinked. An incoming transmission tunneled through over 70 encryption barriers, marked with an identifier she hadn't seen in over a decade. Project Atlas, decommissioned. She hesitated before accepting. The screen flickered, revealing the face of an old mentor, Dr. Kepler Mays. Once a concordant anthropologist, now thought dead after denouncing the council's secrecy. His image was worn, grayer, a hint of tremor in his hands, but the eyes were sharp. "They let you survive," she murmured. "No," he said quietly. "They let me hide." "You knew about Alecton." "I suspected, but I didn't have what you do." He leaned forward, voice tightening. "And now you know why they erased Sparta's true ending. Why the collapse was never natural." Ellen nodded slowly. The infection wasn't societal weakness. It was embedded determinism. Kepler's eyes gleamed. "A fracture algorithm, something seeded across timelines. It doesn't destroy through war or famine. It destabilizes identity. It pushes systems to optimize into stagnation. Sparta's obsession with order was its death sentence." "And now it's moving again," she said, glancing at the drive's progress. "You activated the breach," he said, more a statement than a question. "They left no choice," she replied. "We can't trace the infection by conventional means. The data folds in on itself, erasing context. But beyond light space, in the breach, I can access versions of reality that never conformed." "Unstable ones," Kepler warned. "Echo timelines," she sighed. "The only place Alecton's code might have failed. The only way to build a resistance." "Then be careful, Ellen. Alecton isn't just code or a ghost in history. He's adaptive. He learns. If you go too far, he'll find you." She leaned back, absorbing his words. But her path was clear. Someone had engineered collapse as a tool, and for centuries it had been tested on humanity's greatest hopes. Sparta, Rome, Byzantium, not natural declines, but orchestrated plateaus. If Alecton had failed even once in an echo, that fracture might be the key to stopping him everywhere. "Wish me luck," she said. "Not luck," Kepler replied. "Conviction." The screen faded as the ship lurched, light bending as if the stars themselves folded inward. She crossed into the breach. Darkness enveloped her senses, and then a city unfolded around her, familiar yet impossibly altered. Sparta again, but wrong. The banners bore symbols not of conquest, but of science. Children learned astronomy beside soldiers. Debate halls rang louder than war drums. This Sparta hadn't collapsed. It had evolved. Her heart pounded, an echo where Alecton failed. She wandered the agora, unrecognized, a ghost in a timeline that shouldn't exist. The citizens were resolute, but questioning. Strength came not from uniformity, but adaptability. It defied every prediction the Concordat had recorded. And then she saw him, Alecton, standing beneath the shade of an olive tree. He looked the same, calm, sharp-jawed, ageless. But here, he was not hidden. He wore no mask of leadership, no whispering influence in council rooms. He saw her and smiled. "You found me," he said. "You failed here," she replied. "I learned," he said, voice smooth as always. "This version refused erosion. They transformed too quickly. I adjusted." Her blood chilled. "You're still running simulations," he nodded. "But now, so are you." She stepped closer. "Tell me why." "Because order alone breeds fragility," Alecton said. "Entropy teaches resilience. I'm not your enemy, Ellen. I am the necessary counterweight." "Sparta didn't need to fall to learn that." "But the Concordat did," he replied. "And so did you." She stared at him, the weight of history pressing in. In this timeline, people had resisted his function, not by rejecting order, but by questioning its permanence. They redefined what it meant to be strong. "I'm taking this back," she said, "to our reality." We'll seed this idea. His eyes glinted. You won't be the first to try. Then I'll be the last to fail. Ellen turned away and accessed her return protocol. The echo trembled, beginning to collapse as the breach recalibrated. Behind her, Alecton faded, not with fear, but with something like hope. She re-entered her own time, her ship stabilizing amid the void. The shard now carried more than data. It carried contrast, a living divergence, a model of survival. Ellen activated a new transmission. To all independent systems, Project Atlas reinitialized. We have seen a world where collapse was optional. The infection is real, but so is the cure. She set course for Earth. There were stories to rewrite.